last little sip of water. Alrighty. Hi guys, welcome. Thank you for joining. Before we begin, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Naturalistic. I'm a zoology major at Oregon State University. My partner Fergie and I also breed Indonesian blue-tongued skinks at Folkvang Exotics. Today we're going to be going over the natural diet of blue-tongued skinks and how we can apply that into captivity. So there will be a recording and a copy of this slideshow available afterwards, as I do know there's a lot of folks that want to join but can't make it yet. So at least that'll be saved for everybody. So some of the information we will be going through today is a look into their biology and natural history, nutrition-related health issues, going over cat and dog food, talking about if grain-free is truly safe, which expert and evidence does say otherwise, so that'll be very interesting to get into. We will also be going over homebrew diets, if raw meat is safe, supplementation, safe and non-safe food lists, commercial diets, dry food, feeding amount and frequency. We'll be going over if your skink is a picky eater, as that is a common complaint question we get. There will be some further expert input at the end, a small review, and then we'll be going into the Q&A. So first, we will be starting with the number one rule, which is diversity is the key to every animal's diet, and blue-tongued skinks are no exception. So the type of teeth, backing up, read too fast ahead. Blue-tongued skinks are no exception. They have access to hundreds of species of flora and fauna in the wild, and in captivity that is significantly reduced. So diving into some biology, now we're going to look into the teeth. The type of teeth they have, the type of teeth an animal has, gives us insight into their diets. So there are many different kinds of teeth in the animal kingdom. I will say I might butcher some of these because big words. So most lizards have aquodont, pleurodont, or thecodont teeth, or thecodont. English is a difficult language. Blue-tongued skinks have underdeveloped teeth. They have blunt, incisor-like conical teeth in the front for holding. So if you've been bitten by one and they tend to leave just little tiny dots of blood, that's from those conical teeth. Meanwhile, their cheek teeth, the teeth in the back, have specialized crowns that have expanded to form broad crushing or grinding surfaces. So these are called molariform teeth. So looking into dog teeth, because dog food's been a common staple recommendation by blue-tongue breeders and keepers for decades. So wanted to compare that. So when we compare the two animals' diets and natural histories, we can see quite a discrepancy, especially with the teeth. Dogs have canines, incisors, premolars, and molars. They are all meant for piercing, tearing, shredding, chewing, and holding. These indicate more of a carnivorous diet. So what do blue-tongued skinks actually eat in the wild? These skinks are opportunistic eaters. This means that they will adapt to whatever food items are available to them. Blue-tongued skinks do not follow a specialized diet. Studies on both Thylacoa gigas and Thylacoa syncoides have shown that they eat a large variety of plants, such as mushrooms, flowers, grass seedlings, shoots, leaves. Please don't feed fungus because we don't know what is truly safe for them yet. They've just been found to eat them in the wild. We don't know if there's any actual safe mushrooms for them yet. They also eat soft vegetables, fruits, mostly berries, insects such as snails, beetles, roaches, larvae. They'll also eat whole prey such as small birds, mice, lizards, even snakes. And they will also eat carrion on occasion, including the bones. One of my favorite quotes is from Glenn Shea, which is, Thylacoa species, while foraging widely, do not rely on speed to capture food, but are more browsers in foraging strategy. So diversity is the key to success. Because they don't follow a specialized diet, and because they don't follow a specialized diet, they need that diversity. And without that diversity, that can get them sick. We also need to have proper supplementation. MBD, which is a form of secondary nutritional hyperparathyroidism, it is the critical lack of usable calcium in the animal's body, resulting in the brain asking for calcium from the bones instead of the blood. Signs that your blue-tongued skink is beginning to develop MBD of any kind is by kinking in the tail. Worsening symptoms include bowed legs, soft skull, rubber jaw, and deformed spines. Once they have those deformities, they are unfortunately irreversible, but you can stop it from getting worse. So what causes SNHP and how do we prevent it? So the primary causes of SNHP is a poorly prepared insects, which aren't gut-loaded or dusted with supplementation. Diets high in phosphorus, diets with lack of diversity, or an insufficient intake or absorption of calcium and or D3. So if you look at this baby Halmahera on the left here, this is a skink that I had personally and was given to my local rescue. So if you see, she has swollen joints, protruding bones, and her skull was soft and her legs were bowed, though you can't really see that here. She's since recovered. Her name is Hope. Shout out to Melanie for taking such amazing care of her and having her recover. So how do we prevent SNHP? Simply increasing supplementation won't prevent it in reptiles. So a diverse diet combined with proper supplementation is crucial for optimal nutrient absorption. We suggest offering at least 4 to 5 different food items, more if you can, for both protein and plant matter, as each month is recommended if you can, as again, they eat hundreds of species in the wild. Another common health issue that causes SNHP is hyperphosphatemia, which is too much phosphate in the blood. Even with calcium supplements, high phosphate levels in the blood prevent proper calcium absorption until that phosphate is reduced, which often results in hypocalcemia, which is too little calcium in the blood. So what contributes to this? Thankfully, many commercial cat and dog foods often have a balanced calcium to phosphorus ratio. That's the key for balancing that. But homebrew diets with human-grade meats, which are boneless meats, stuff we'd eat in a grocery store, those are very high in phosphorus and very low in calcium, which can lead to that buildup in their blood. So how do we prevent this? Most prey insects and many grocery greens have an inverse calcium to phosphorus ratio. We want, on average, a 1.5 to 1 or a 2 to 1 ratio for the calcium to phosphorus. So when it's inversed, it's too low calcium. So you got to make sure to supplement properly. It's not recommended to feed any ground meat, mince meat, or any other form of boneless meat. It's recommended to use whole prey or whole ground prey instead, as that's all the blood, the bones, the organs, the brain, everything. It's all the good stuff. It's what they would eat in the wild. So, if you look at the skink on the left here, oh yeah, I also forgot that. Avoid using grain-free cat and dog food because that also contributes to increased levels of phosphates. But if we look at this tail on the left, this is my skink. This is Hades. This happened in our first 2 years of keeping him, where we thought we were supplementing enough calcium and we were not. This is why it is important to not use boneless meats. There are ways to balance it, but back then we didn't have that information, and it can be very difficult to balance yourself because it could still be very easy to oversupplement or undersupplement them. So Hades did develop hyperphosphatemia because of that increase of phosphate. We stopped it, So that's all that happened is just that tail kinking, but it's important why we like to preach variety, proper supplementation, because we don't want this happening to your skinks. Mistakes happen. It's happened to other breeders as well in their first couple of years keeping, and other keepers. So going into hypovitaminosis A and hypervitaminosis A. Hypovitaminosis A is a deficiency in vitamin A. It's caused by the lack of proper supplementation and proper diversity in their diet. Hypervitaminosis A is excess vitamin A. It's often caused by oversupplementing or offering too much offal. I don't know how to pronounce it. Organs, the edible organs. Skinks with hypovitaminosis A will present with stomatitis, conjunctivitis, as well as consistent shedding and scale issues. Some skinks with chronic hemipenile impaction may indicate a deficiency as well. Hypervitaminosis A presents very similarly, except it also tends to include more skin ulcerations. On top of that, bacteria and improper humidity can cause quite similar symptoms with the mouth rot and the crustiness in the eyes, which is that conjunctivitis and the stomatitis. They can be caused by too low of humidity and bacteria as well, so it's important you check your parameters before assuming that it could be diet related, because sometimes it's as simple as just a slight adjustment in humidity. So the vitamin A is very important for keeping the mucous membranes healthy. So what hypovitaminosis A does is replace mucous membrane with skin tissue, and that's how you get that little buildup of crusty. So a diverse diet and utilizing a multivitamin with performed vitamin A at least twice a month is one of the best ways of prevention. Onto the thick ones, the thick skinkers. Let's talk about obesity. Obesity has been quite common in the reptile community due to chunky culture. That's really just about any animal community, I feel. But this can actually cause quite a bit of harm to our skinks. Obese skinks are at a higher risk of hepatic lipidosis, which is fatty liver disease, which causes obesity also causes breathing difficulties, increased stress on the organs and joints, and reduced mobility. So, to prevent this, obesity is caused by feeding too many calories, too high of fat, too high of sugar, too frequently. Calorie-dense foods, including high protein, high fat, and high sugar foods, should be fed less frequently, especially if you are coming on with an obese skink. Ways to prevent it is by providing a proper sized enclosure with plenty of enrichment to increase activity. And you also want to make them work for their food, because this is very important for their psychological health, because yes, reptiles do have mental health. So they naturally forage, they naturally hunt for their food. They have chemical sensors on their tongues that help them grab odor particles in the air, and that's how they search for food. So we need to provide that to them so it both increases activity and provides them proper mental stimulation. And there was a study done, which is in my sources, where it shows that they actually become a little bit more active if you hide their food around and make them work for it more, even more shy skinks. With our more social skinks, we will use rubber-tipped tongs, and we recommend the rubber-tipped tongs because sometimes the skinks tend to be very food motivated, and we don't want them to hurt themselves by biting just straight metal. That don't feel good. So that's why we recommend the rubber-tipped tongs. With really social skinks that aren't scared of you, you can play like a small game of chase and have them chase a bug around, a piece of vegetable or fruit around. Really just anything that they might like to chase, you can have them go for. If your skinks are more nervous, then that's when we recommend hiding pieces around the enclosure, but that should be done with social skinks regardless. We just know it can be hard to have more nervous skinks be more willing to hand feed. Some also have puzzle feeders. I've seen people use actual like cat and dog puzzle feeders, and then they will hide insects in there or pieces of veggies, fruit, whatever, and they genuinely seem to enjoy figuring it out. They're rather intelligent lizards. So gout is more uncommon. It does happen, but it's uncommon. Gout is caused by an excess of protein. So gout in blue tongues often presents with swollen limbs, stiff limbs, arm waving, and difficulty walking. It's often caused by excess protein, dehydration, and kidney disease in reptiles. So what it does is that it causes a buildup of uric acid crystals in their joints and organs, and it is incredibly painful. Blue tongue skinks fed dried cat and dog food are at a high risk of developing gout, and blue tongue skinks fed just high protein diets in general, where if it's like excessively straight cat and dog food or excessively straight meat, then they are at a higher risk of developing gout. That's just like in excess. It's very hard for them to get gout unless you're just in excess, though some are more sensitive than others. So we can prevent this by avoiding feeding feeder insects high protein items such as cat and dog food. Roaches and other feeders can already be rather high in protein, so if you just build up more and more protein onto them, that can cause an excess of protein. We also want to limit the dependency of high protein items such as meat, canned cat and dog food, and anything else that's just like even the whole prey. We need to provide a diverse diet and provide fresh water at all times. We do not recommend feeding any dry foods, as dry food does contribute to dehydration and kidney problems. So what's the deal with cat and dog food being fed to lizards? This is an incredibly common thing. Breeders have been feeding canned cat and dog food to blue-tongued skinks for decades without issue. But can we really feed canned cat and dog food to blue-tongued skinks? Yes. But if we want to replicate their natural history, should we? Dr. Thomas Boyer, a co-founder of the ARAV, who also created the Journal of Herpetological Medicine and Surgery, believes we should not be using canned cat and dog food in their diets. That being said, there is a large spectrum of opinions. We sent out a survey and got quite a few responses back. Some of them were saying absolutely no to the canned cat and dog food. Some said it's perfectly fine as part of an addition. But the overall consensus is they agreed that it should not be the primary diet that we depend on. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to go into the natural history and biology is that cats are obligate carnivores, dogs are facultative carnivores, and blue-tongued skinks are omnivores. Evidence has shown that blue-tongued skinks require significantly more plant matter and insects in their diet compared to cats and dogs who require more meat products. So, what are these terms? What's the difference? An obligate carnivore is an animal that gets nearly all of its nutrients from meat. They lack specific enzymes to break down plant matter effectively, like beta-carotene, which is a precursor to vitamin A. For carnivores, that's found in retinol, which is in their tissues. They also require taurine. Cats require taurine, which is an amino acid found only in animal sources, which includes big cats and domestic cats. Facultative carnivores is an animal that derives the majority of their nutrients from animal matter, but they can still digest and eat some plant matter. While an omnivore is an animal that derives their nutrients from both animal matter and plant matter. While there is no clear line for omnivore versus facultative carnivore, it is a spectrum. Omnivory is a spectrum. Omnivores are considered on the spectrum of 10 to 70% plant matter intake, In terms of natural history, dogs require less plant-based foods and insects in their diets compared to blue-tongued skinks. If you desire, canned or raw cat and dog food can be part of their diet, but we don't recommend it being used as a staple due to that very, very high protein content compared to what blue-tongued skinks naturally eat in the wild. So there are positives and negatives of every diet. Every diet can be used incorrectly, but it's also really easy to use them correctly, no matter what type of diet it is. So, some positives of canned cat and dog food is that it has a balanced calcium to phosphorus ratio, which significantly reduces the risk of SNHP. So, this means that you're not going to get all those kinks in the skink because their body is going to have enough calcium in their blood and they don't have to pull it from the bones. Constantly balanced. It also has added vitamins, which reduces the risk of vitamin deficiencies, as you could see in the hypervitaminosis. That looks uncomfortable. So thankfully, that helps balance it out. It also provides a variety of protein options, such as the organs and tissue across multiple prey species. I've seen rabbit, kangaroo, bison, elk. Just a lot of really crazy protein options, which I think is pretty cool, honestly. It's also simple and easy to work with, and it's also convenient for owners because people tend to be busy. We get it. So how about the negatives? It is unnatural to feed adults 1 or 2 meals a week, as is often recommended due to that high caloric density that canned foods have. It is not nutritionally complete for blue tongues either, as we still need to provide plenty of fresh plant matter and live insects into their diet. If it's used too frequently, it can contribute to hepatic lipidosis, renal failure, and gout. Too large of a meal contributes to laziness, lethargy, obesity, and breathing difficulties. And if it's used as a base of a diet, blue-tongued skinks tend to be full grown in less than a year. That can be considered a form of power feeding. We do need to do more studies on specific species, but the majority of blue-tongued skinks do reach full size within 2 years, and most of them are mature between 2 and 3 years. Slow and steady is best, but we don't want it to be, obviously, just really slow or really fast. Kind of got to find that happy middle. Just make sure you pay attention to your skink individually. Before I continue, I want to make it clear again that every diet item can be used improperly. When we go through the homebrew, a lot of the negatives here are very similar for the negatives on homebrew. Everything has its negatives. So we understand that some people would still like to feed canned cat and dog food, so we want to provide some options for how to go about providing a more high quality option. So we recommend avoiding potatoes, tomatoes, carrageenan, and grain-free because those can cause some health issues. With potatoes, it mostly causes bloating, a little bit of a GI upset. Tomatoes are the same. Carrageenan is not proven to be safe. It's also derived from red algae, which has some links to inflammation. And then grain-free is proven to be unsafe. Some skinks are more sensitive than others. Some have much hardier stomachs. Some have much more sensitive stomachs. So again, it does vary by skink. We recommend trying to avoid pea protein in the first 5 ingredients, peas in general, spinach, barley, flaxseed, flour, and fish. Fish can be used occasionally, but it's not recommended due to a buildup of sodium, concerns of metal buildup, and thiaminase buildup, which thiaminase can cause a B1 deficiency. So it's not recommended to use fish. And this is going to be shocking to some about that grain-free. Grain-free is not safe to feed. Grain-free has been the recommended canned food staple for blue tongues for as long as that I have seen. And multiple recent studies have actually shown that grain-free causes dilated cardiomyopathy in dogs, which means their heart cannot pump and process that blood through their bodies very easily. And then as soon as they're swapped over to a regular diet again, without being grain-free with all those legumes, they tend to basically recover. So we just don't want foods that are really high in legume seeds, potatoes, peas, lentils. Findings also indicate that grain-free foods cause reduced red blood cell count, as well as contributes to hyperphosphatemia, or that increased phosphate in the blood. What? So, homebrew is only a small addition to their diet. These can be pre-made and frozen, or a serving can be made fresh. Fresh food is still required in their diets no matter what, though. We recommend using homebrew meals to assist with plant intake and enrichment, as we hear many people struggle with getting them to eat their vegetables and plants. Making it more of a mush, sometimes blending in berries, tends to make it more appealing and appetizing to them. So we recommend homebrew meals to be 50% or more being plant matter. Animal matter is not required. If you want to use animal matter, it should be whole ground prey or canned cat and dog food, as some people do use. And it should be less than 50%. If you're using only organs as the meat in the homebrew, we recommend that the organs being less than 20%, as they are very high in vitamins. And it can cause an overdose, especially with liver. Liver is very high in vitamin A, so if you feed too much liver, that can cause hypervitaminosis A, excess vitamin A. So overall, we do recommend avoiding using boneless meats altogether. So boneless meats are the meats we would get at a grocery store, which would be ground meat, minced meat, breast meat, steak, etc. Boneless meat is rich in protein, fat, and phosphorus, but it is also low in calcium and vitamin A. So while there is guidelines to balance the calcium to phosphorus ratio for mammals that tend to struggle with metabolic bone disease in captivity, it's best to not use boneless meat and just focus on the whole ground prey, as it can be easy to over or under supplement, and it's best to not take that risk. You can feed boneless meat as a treat on occasion. That's fine. We just don't recommend it being fed consistently, because the whole ground prey includes bones, organs, muscle, blood, sometimes skin, feathers, fur. It ensures no calcium or vitamins are needed to be added. So the positives of providing a homebrew diet is that it provides a broader range of diversity. A broader range of diversity also means a broader range of nutrients. It's easier to balance the plant to animal ratio if you go by weight rather than just trying to guess in the moment visually. That can be difficult for some. For others, it's easier. You know exactly what's going into your Skink's meals, and it would be more fresh ingredients and not as processed compared to just dog food, for example. But again, you can add dog food to them, and it makes a great mix. It's also an excellent way to get them to eat more plant matter, and it's also good to get them to forage, because you can just pull apart little small pieces and hide it around the enclosure, and those tongues do all the work for them. It's also easy to make serving sizes, freeze them, and then pop a serving out in the door of the fridge to thaw overnight if you need it for the next day. If you're like running out to run errands to work, you can't sit there and feed insects or sit there and watch them eat, whatever, just gotta go. It's really good for that too. The negatives of homebrew meals is that it also is not nutritionally complete for blue tongues, because you still need to provide fresh plant matter and live insects. If you're using meat products, then the homebrew should also be fed sparingly, because it's unnatural to feed adults 1 or 2 meals a week, as again, adding that meat tends to increase that caloric density. as well as the protein. If you're using the meat as the base of the diet, it can contribute to power feeding if it's fed too frequently, as again, they're supposed to be full grown in about 2 years. They are mature in 2 to 3. If you use too much meat too frequently, it can contribute to hepatic lipidosis, renal failure, and gout. So again, very, very similar negatives as feeding canned cat and dog food. Everything can be used incorrectly, but things can also be used correctly. That's why we push for diversity. So, is raw meat safe? Blue tongues are known for eating carrion in the wild, so we often get asked if raw meat is safe to feed them or not. As we know, while they can eat something doesn't necessarily mean they should eat it. We need to weigh the benefits versus the risks and if there are safer, more appropriate alternatives or not. Many veterinarians advise against feeding raw due to the concerns of cross-contamination of bacteria, as contamination can also happen during processing. And blue tongues tend to be quite sloppy eaters, so the concerns of any bacteria remaining stays the same, as it could very well just get all over them, and then you touch them, and then that bacteria is all over you. So it's recommended to wash with warm soapy water after handling or after feeding, in regards to if raw meat is involved. If you are concerned about bacteria, you can cook the center of the meat to 165 degrees Fahrenheit or 74 degrees Celsius. This does, however, change the protein and the structure of the meat, and not all skinks or reptiles in general like cooked meat. And it does reduce some nutrients. And remember, high protein items should be limited. So on to supplementation. It's incredibly important for their nutritional needs. Properly supplementing your blue tongue skink alongside providing a diverse diet are how we prevent any nutritional deficiencies, such as SNHP and hypervitaminosis and hypovitaminosis. Starting with calcium, the type of calcium you use does depend on your UVB. If you have UVB that you are consistently changing or checking with a UVB solar meter, then you want to use calcium without D3 the majority of the time, as they get their D3 through the UVB, and it can be easy to overdose if they get the D3 from the UVB and dietary. If you do not have UVB, then you want to use calcium with D3 the majority of the time, but you still want to switch it up with both of them because it's good to have that variety and that little break in excess nutrients or additional nutrients. All insects, grocery grains, and organs should be dusted with calcium. Some vitamins are water soluble, while others are not. So we recommend to not use multivitamin with organs, as it's very high in vitamins and phosphorus, but very low in calcium. We don't want to cause an overdose. Some examples is liver is high in vitamin A, vitamin B, and iron. Heart and gizzard is high in vitamin B. Giblets are high in vitamin A and vitamin B. Beef tongue is high in vitamin B, and tripe is high in vitamin A and vitamin B. It is recommended to dust fattier items every 10 to 14 days with a multivitamin. Pardon me. Some examples of fattier items are waxworms, butterworms, superworms, as well as frozen thawed pinky mice or pinky rats. When it comes to supplementing, we recommend getting a little plastic Tupperware. Place your insects in there or your greens and give a light sprinkle of supplementation, and then just shake the crap out of it. Make a little fun dance out of it. I know some people who would do like a little shaky dance song. It's cute. So you will still want to feed dusted insects rather immediately, as they will groom the supplementation off themselves or dust it off of them when they're just roaming through the enclosure. When it comes to canned and raw commercial cat and dog food, the calcium to phosphorus ratio is balanced. It is within the appropriate range that most reptiles require, so calcium supplementation is usually not required for cat and dog food. Same with multivitamins. They often have their own added vitamins, so we don't recommend adding multivitamin to it, as it can also cause an excess. There is always that emphasis on high quality products and diversity if you use canned food. We even suggest switching up the flavor type of canned food or even the brand. Just keep switching it up. An occasional dusting is still always recommended though, because it doesn't hurt to have a little extra just in case. So how do we know if we are supplementing too much? Excess calcium often appears in the urate. So that is the white part of the stool, and that is made out of uric acid and salts, and that's their version of urine. So if the urate starts to turn orange or yellow, it's a sign of too much calcium. It could also be a sign of improper D3 absorption, and it can be a sign of too much calcium. This can also cause symptoms of metabolic bone disease if you keep doing calcium. Overdoses can cause similar problems as having too little, with some slight variety. So a calcium deficiency starts in the body. It actually starts in the hands, where their bones are the thinnest, but we can't see that without an x-ray. So most owners and keepers will notice a kink beginning to form in the tail, or multiple kinks beginning to form in the tail, before they even know that something's happening. Not your fault. Not anyone's fault. When it comes to the multivitamin, if you just want to jump back to the hypervitaminosis, hypovitaminosis, it goes over the symptoms. A vitamin B1 deficiency results from excess thiaminase found in feeder fish or from inadequate multivitamins and poorly gut-loaded feeders and insectivores. Blue-tongued skinks are no exception, considering they do eat a large amount of insects. Symptoms include muscle tremors, lack of coordination, head tilting, and stargazing. So, what does staple in moderation and sparingly mean in terms of frequency? A staple in their diet is something that makes up a significant portion of their diet. These provide a broad range of nutrients, and it is typically recommended to feed this item multiple times a week or multiple times each feeding. Something that is fed in moderation is part of a rotating variety. These items can have a little higher caloric density, higher sugar levels, higher water content, etc. It's often recommended to feed this no more than once or twice a week, especially as an example, if you feed too much fruit, then it can contribute to runny stools due to that excess sugar and that excess hydration. So when it comes to sparingly, we recommend these as treat items because they can be high in certain nutritional content, and they could negatively impact them if it's used as a staple or used too frequently. These could be very high in sugars, very high in fats, calories, phosphorus, etc. So the typical recommendation is 10 to 14 days in between that. You can vary it up, of course, because diversity is the key. They're not going to have a consistent diet in the wild. That's just a recommendation. When it comes to fruit should make up no more than 10% of their diet. Fruit is not required, and it should be limited as a treat regardless, just due to that excess sugar and excess hydration. So when we do have food lists, and the fruits in the staple fruits should be prioritized as you can feed these the most. The moderate ones are ones you can feed in a rotation, as they have slightly higher sugars, carbs, or water. And then the fruits fed sparingly are considered more candy for blueies. They're very high in sugars and or carbs. Here are the diet ratio recommendations. Juveniles tend to eat more protein, while adults tend to eat more plant matter. We had the most success in transitioning juveniles to adult with the plant intake by just slowly increasing the amount. This includes just blending some up, chopping some up very finely, grating some, These guys are very intelligent. They're very curious. They like to think. They like to smell things. That's how they really examine the world around them. So if you make the plant matter fun for them, interesting for them, they are much more likely, much more willing to eat it. And we do recommend prioritizing invertebrates when it comes to their protein intake, as that is their primary protein source in the wild. So here is our plant matter. Again, this will be available online after the webinar, so people don't need to panic about taking notes or anything. Here are some recommendations that I really enjoy. The collard greens have an excellent calcium to phosphorus ratio. The squash is a particular favorite for a lot of my skinks. Arugula is nice in calcium as well. Flowers, oh goodness. Dandelion, if you saw at the beginning slide, Hades was eating, mouth open, towards a dandelion flower. They love flowers. So dark leafy greens have more nutrients, while lighter greens tend to have more of a water content. We kind of consider that crunchy water. So it's recommended to grate, steam, or finely chop harder veggies. They do enjoy chewing. They enjoy using their jaws to crush. So if you provide a variety of different textures, they genuinely enjoy experimenting a little more with different flavors. The bottom right here is avoids. These are, to my knowledge, toxic to just about every single reptile and a lot of animals as well. Here's the animal protein. The staples are the insects. This is just a bunch of examples that tend to be recommended. Snails are a huge part of their diet in the wild. Their teeth really show that. And their close relatives, the pink-tongued skink, their diet is primarily snails and mollusks. So you can get canned snails. Those tend to be a little bit more expensive and a little smaller, but you can get them. You can also get frozen thawed snails. These are usually found more at Asian grocery stores as escargot. Just make sure that there's no added salt because excess sodium can be bad. You can get your own snails as well. Just make sure they are not native and make sure you read up on your local laws. Not every state or country allows to have snails, especially land snails. But freshwater snails tend to be pretty easy for people to get. Some examples of those are pond, ram's horn, and mystery snails. Apple snails are a common one too, but I am not sure if they're illegal or not in the States. I know they're invasive in Florida, so probably not a good one. But examples to look into. All invertebrate feeders should be live and should be from reptile-based suppliers, as those tend to be the higher quality ones. If you are feeding dried insects, these actually have a very poor calcium to phosphorus ratio. The majority of their nutrients are in those guts, in that gut loading. So it can cause a little bit of malnutrition going on because who knows what's going on with that particular batch, what they were fed prior. Whole bunch of we don't know. In moderation, I love Reptilinks and Mother of Reptiles. Frozen thawed whole prey is excellent as well. I know a lot of people who will do feeder anoles. I know some people who will feed off failure to thrive geckos, failure to thrive snakes, like before they didn't even hatch out of the egg type thing. There's a large variety, thankfully, which I really enjoy. I've also found a lot of skinks tend to have a preference. So something fun you can do is see what your skink likes the most. And that way, what we do is we'll have like a little lineup of food and put one skink in front of it, and then whatever they tend to gravitate towards first, tends to be their more favorites, and we do keep it spread around so that way they're not just like right next to each other. They gotta work for it. But it's just a fun way to interact with your skink more during feeding. So, commercial diets. There is no such thing as a nutritionally complete commercial diet for reptiles. Yet. Quote from Dr. Mark Mitchell. I love Dr. Mark Mitchell. He is one of the leading contributors to reptile nutrition in captivity, reptile and amphibian nutrition. So, there are no commercial diets available for reptiles that are intended. There are commercial diets available for reptiles that are intended to be complete, with many manufacturers claiming their products meet the nutritional needs of reptiles. But these diets have not been proven using evidence-based research, as has been done with dog and cat diets. I expect the day will come when these diets are capable of providing complete nutrition, but they will require rigorous research. Dr. Mark Mitchell, DVM, former ARAV president. He is an excellent man. So, by his recommendations, appropriate commercial reptile food should be limited to no more than 20 to 40% of their overall diet. Some appropriate addition examples are Reptilinks, Mother Reptiles, or Bluey Buffet. Do keep an eye on some of the Rapashi products, as some do have added potato, which again can be sensitive to some skinks. Inappropriate additions are dry foods, the Zoomed foods, the Lugarti. Some of them contain soy, potato, and whey, which can cause sensitivities in reptiles. Carrageenan, again, isn't proven to be safe, and that is in some ingredients as well. And then dry foods in general are not appropriate. On to why dry food's not appropriate. Many reptiles get the majority of their hydration through their diet, though they should still have a fresh water source available at all times, as they still will be able to drink in the wild, as well as have their intake. The issue comes when they consume dry food. The moisture content in that food is significantly lower compared to wet food, fresh animal, plant products, or even live food. The process of digestion requires water. Dry food absorbs water to aid in digestion, which means their body has to provide the water that the dry food lacks, as well as provide further water to digest it, leading in an overall net loss of hydration. If an animal gets the majority of their hydration through their diet, the amount of water they drink will not offset the amount of water taken during the digestion process. So even if they are fed dry food and they have fresh water consistently, that won't be enough to keep them hydrated appropriately. Some dehydrated products such as meat, whole prey, or some flowers and greens can be rehydrated as a treat, as these are not processed and tend to have relatively decent nutrients, but also varies by what is being fed. Gotta watch out for the calcium to phosphorus ratios and the vitamins. So if you are feeding like a piece of chicken, dehydrated chicken, the concern of being a little bit too high in phosphorus is there, which is why it should be a treat. If there's anything that's heavily processed, like pellets or kibble, do not feed that. It's very processed. Their bodies are not built for it. They're not evolved for it. The majority of leading veterinarians in the United States with zoos and colleges even heavily recommend against dry food. So, what time and how is the best way to feed them? Sorry, lost my spot. So blue tongue skinks are diurnal. This means that they are active during the daytime. Since blue tongues are ectotherms, they depend on the environment to warm up. It's ideal to feed them before the hottest part of the day, but after they've had time to wake up. Many skinks tend to avoid basking during peak heat, after all. They're usually most active and basking in the mornings and early afternoons, as well as the evenings. So we recommend feeding approximately 1 to 2 hours after lights on, as that is when some studies have noticed and what we have noticed that skinks tend to start coming out more and waking up. Enrichment is a huge thing as well. So when feeding, we recommend scattering small bite-sized pieces around the enclosure instead of placing them in a dish. This encourages them to forage. Blue tongues have those chemical sensors on their tongues that allow them to collect odor particles and bring it to the Jacobson's organ to process. If you look inside their mouths, you'll see that right kind of at the peak of their nose. That is where the Jacobson organ is on the inside of their mouth, is up in that little cavity. So that is what they use to really process smells around them. So they can even smell subterranean food. There was a study where they observed a blue-tongued skink foraging for mushrooms that were like deep in the dirt, and they just went digging for it and found it. It's cool. Sprinkling some insects such as black soldier fly larvae at night crawlers, as these guys are pretty high in calcium, placing them around the substrate and letting them just do their thing allows skinks to behave naturally, to forage, and to hunt for their food. If your husbandry is on par, there is no risk of impaction. They eat rocks in the wild. I wish I was joking. They do eat rocks. It's believed to aid in digestion. That does not mean feed your skink rocks. Um, it's gonna happen type thing. Please don't be scared if they eat something they're not supposed to in terms of substrate. As long as it's not a huge piece, always keep an eye on your skink. So foraging lizards will flick their tongues repeatedly as they explore. This is a huge thing behaviorally as well. If you are handling your skink and they aren't tongue blepping, they're probably a little nervous, a little scared. So when that tongue is flicking, their brains are thinking. And when it comes to them hunting and foraging, we really want that. We really want to encourage that, as that greatly benefits their psychological and their physiological health. This helps them locate and identify their prey, allowing them to distinguish between plant and animal matter. They can distinguish. So, onto feeding amount and frequency. How much should we be feeding them? Evidence suggests that providing diets based on metabolic rates is an excellent starting point. From there, we take activity level, body condition, and food type into consideration. Metabolic rates of most reptiles are estimated to be about 2 to 4% of their body weight every other day, or 1 to 2% daily. We do have estimation charts, so don't stress over the numbers. All you need is just a proper weight scale at home to measure in grams. So frequency varies by the age of the skink and the nutritional and caloric value of the food item offered. Age also plays a role in dietary needs, with juveniles benefiting from higher fat diets and adults from lower fat ones. So here is our frequency chart recommendation for insects. Again, this is just a base for people to start. We need to make sure you are focusing on your skink in front of you, not anyone else's. So just for the base, we recommend babies and juveniles about 5 to 7 insects daily every other day. Subadults to older, 3 to 5 insects 3 to 4 times a week. And adults 2 years plus, 3 to 4 insects 2 to 3 times a week. Pardon me. So just a base, just to start. If skinks are much more active, they may need more protein, they may need more fat. If you have a skink that tends to hide a lot more frequently, then you want one that's lower in fat, a little bit higher, a little bit more lean, higher in protein, leaner in fat. So, for example, larva is very high in fat compared to other beetles, roaches, etc. So, appropriate size feeders does matter. Whatever you are feeding your blue-tongued skink, no matter if it's insects, rodents, fruit, vegetables, anything, it should not be wider than the space between their eyes, as this helps reduce choking risks. One second. So here is the base for the plant matter. Again, just a base. This is just to help people get started, and you will be able to figure out what your skink prefers. So some skinks do prefer more plant intake, some prefer more protein intake. It varies by age, and it also varies by subspecies, I've noticed. For example, our ambon tend to be much more willing to eat plant matter than the majority of our other subspecies. We do need more observations on this. This is just my notice with my particular group of skinks. So we do suggest basing off about 3% of body weight, so that way it gives you some leniency in rounding up or rounding down. I do have some skinks that will prefer to eat all 4% in just plants because they like it that much. But overall, it's important to maintain an overall diverse diet and keep an eye on their body condition. If we take a look back to the obese skinks, we don't want that. We don't want the chunks. On to picky eaters. A picky skink is not a hungry skink. If they're being picky, they're either not hungry or there's something more going on. So if your skink only nibbles or leaves behind their least favorite foods, you're likely overfeeding or offering foods too high in calories. In the wild, skinks will eat sporadically, primarily insects, vegetation, or whole prey. In captivity, they tend to get more food with a higher caloric density more often. This tends to result in more lazy behavior, especially if it's just sedentary in a little tray and they can't forage or hunt. Check back at the feeding guidelines and adjust how many days of fasting where it's no food, reducing the amount of protein, reducing the amount of fat, or just cutting back on high calorie foods in general. Don't do anything too extreme if they are being picky, because we just kind of want to figure out what they need. This behavior could also be due to brumation, too low temperatures, hormones, or health issues. So one of the easiest ones to rule out is temperature and brumation. With brumation, Indonesian skinks do not brumate. Not at all. Their temps don't get nearly cold enough in the wild, and if they start behaving with brumation symptoms, either their husbandry is off or they are sick. They should not be brumating whatsoever. So northerns and easterns do brumate in the winter. So if it is winter and you have a northern or an eastern and they are not eating, it is likely brumation. Please do not offer them any food until they come up in the spring. They will also estivate if temps are too hot. So that's basically the equivalent of brumation, but in the summer, is how I try to refer to it as for myself. It just makes it easier for me. But basically, temps are too hot. So prey, food, most likely is limited. Water tends to be limited. So skinks and a majority of reptiles in these environments will go down into cooler temperatures and just kind of sleep out the heat wave, basically. Ensure proper heating if it is not brumation or if it's an Indo. If your temperatures are correct, consider a vet visit. ARAV.org does have a free search function. We had it on some previous slides in the health. Hormonal changes are another possibility. This particularly happens winter through spring. The Indonesian blue tongues are breeding while the majority of northerns and easterns are brumating. So males will tend to be a little bit less likely to eat if they are really hormonal. Some don't have an issue. Some, they're just a bit too busy looking for some love. So a big complaint we get is how their blue tongue tends to act like a toddler and not eat their vegetables. So we truly believe we should treat them like a toddler, and that's being picky with their vegetables, by making it more enriching, making it more fun, making it easier for them. So blue tongues are not salad eaters, unlike bearded dragons, who are omnivores with a higher plant intake. If you think back to their teeth, they are that very rounded. The only little bit of sharp they have is that conical teeth in their front, and that's not very effective in cutting and tearing plant matter like bearded dragons and other agamids do. So, because of that, we need to adjust their dietary sizes accordingly. So, to encourage your skink to eat more greens and veggies in captivity, we recommend chopping them into small little pieces, little squares. For harder veggies, we recommend cutting them into 8-inch, 1/8 inch squares, which allows them to crunch and use their teeth a lot more frequently. A food processor, shredding, or grating can also work. You could also steam some harder veggies or make a thick paste or puree with some veggies that can make it more appealing. Sorry, with some berries. Berries can make it more appealing. But it's important that you also switch up the texture type. You don't want to have one texture all the time, as they tend to come into contact with a bunch of different textures, keeping their teeth clean and keeping gunk out of their mouth overall. Another method, if you are struggling with them eating greens and veggies, is to get a little food dish, preferably an escape-proof food dish, put some insects, live insects at the bottom of the food dish, and then sprinkle greens and veggies on top. This kind of forces them to eat some greens and veggies in the process of trying to eat the insects. So remember, if your skink is being picky, it's likely not hungry. One of the easiest ways to get them to eat more veggies is to reduce more protein. If you are struggling to get your skink to eat insects, for example, reduce dog food, reduce meat. They most likely don't even realize that insects are a food source. Some of them do seem to struggle with recognizing it as a food source. So having it move really frequently, or even having some of the innards come out so the skinks can smell it, that tends to really get them locked in. But again, if they're being picky, they're probably not hungry. So, some of my favorite quotes from professionals across the world. Ken Harkwitz, may he rest. He says he is not a fan of dog foods as a protein source for blue-tongued skinks, and why grain-free? Rather, I suggest and use Rapashi's Bluey Buffet. You can order from online, Amazon, or some better reptile pet stores. Search my past comments on Blue Tongue Skink Diet for added info. You mix this product and use along with fruits and veggies. This was an email that was sent through the Veterinary Information Network quite a few years back, which is why it's talking about other information. Another one is from Dr. Kathleen Cavill. She says, in general, I think if there is a species-specific diet for reptiles, that can sometimes be a good resource, but advise keeping it varied to include fresh vegetables and live insects, which can be helpful to better recreate what they might encounter in the wild. Additionally, I think it can be a source of enrichment for them to have to hunt for some of their food. Dr. Alyssa Walker, who has a bachelor's in animal science and a PhD in microbiology, gotten a lot of information from her and animal nutrition. Love her. She says some canned dog foods can be good for reptiles that occasionally feed on dead animals in the wild. Of course, dog food should be supplemented with insects, veggies, and fruit. Dr. J.C. Burkham says, I realize that there are sources out there citing canned cat and dog food as a main component of their diet. I always emphasize the importance of variety and high quality, minimally processed food. Sarah J., who is a specialty, her clinic is an exotic specialty clinic, and she's a vet assistant there. I've been following along on her vet training journey as she goes through the assistants. I love to see how far she decides to go with her knowledge. Regardless, she says, I think dog or cat food can be great options to use in a feeding program that has additional or rotational options. My negative feelings on feeding canned prepared diets come from the exclusivity of their use, which that is my gripe with it as well. We should be focusing on variety. So, review. What is the best and most naturalistic diet for a blue-tongued skink in captivity? which is a diet with as large of a diversity that you can provide that also provides them hunting and foraging opportunities. It's fun, in my opinion, letting them forage, watching them forage, and just watching their brains think. They are a lot more intelligent and active than initially led to believe, in my opinion. Here are all my sources. Got 47 of them. Very proud of that. Again, these will all be available after the webinar. The entire slideshow. So a special thank you to all the veterinarians, vet techs, vet assistants, zoos, students, and all the professors that contributed to this information, suggested resources, or provided other forms of assistance. I also want to thank the long-term Tiliqua breeders who also provided their input and experience in regards to their experience with canned food diets and homebrew diets. And on to questions. Yes, 48 sources. 47. Bleh. All right, I am scrolling through comments. Yeah, another comment about the garden snails. A friend of mine, Darren, in Indonesia, one of his friends had a blue tongue get out, their native environment, and his snail problem that was eating all of his plants went completely away. So they love their snails. Please don't release your blue tongues, though. The vacuum-packed dubia roaches are okay as a treat, especially in emergencies. That tends to be pretty common, kind of as a backup item. It's also okay in moderation, kind of as a rotating treat as well, but it should not be a staple. And thankfully, there are a ton of other insects. You don't need to focus on roaches. Just literally anything you think you can get. Even beetles, from mealworm beetles, all the darkling beetle species. I know people who feed isopods. Some people will actually raise up grubs and feed them as well, which is interesting. No, potatoes equals bad does not include sweet potatoes and yams. It is a completely different plant. So the sweet potatoes are safe to feed, just not like regular potatoes like russets, goldens. The cano snails for the canned snails. I forgot exactly which brand it was, but it is cano snails. Cold-blooded cafe. It's been a while since I checked, but they were working on a seafood variety, which included snails. I am not sure where they're at on that, but that is a good option in the future. The vacuum-packed dubia roaches are okay as treats and in moderation. It would be important to look more at the nutritional contents of the vacuum-packed insects and then try and compare it to the live ones and work it out that way. If it's a little bit closer in protein, would be good as in moderation. I really don't see it as being an issue as, part of rotating variety. And yeah, Peters, I love Peters. They're goofy things. If you guys have more questions and we don't get it through here, you can join the Happy Dragons Discord server and ask me there. You can also message my personal Facebook or Instagram at Folkvang Exotics, and I can also help answer some questions there. Because I know it doesn't work for everybody with timing. I know quite a few people would be watching the live stream after, so hello to them. Hello to future people. Yeah, textures is a huge thing. If you are consistently feeding your skink something that's like very soft, very mushy, and that's like the only thing they're eating, that can cause some dental problems just because they aren't able to naturally chew on different textures. But I found some skinks will love some vegetables more of a mush, more soft, and then some of them would prefer them more grated up, really small. It's really interesting to see just how much preference each individual skink has. And I truly believe that's one of the most fun things when it comes to feeding them is figuring out your own skink's individual diet and personality. 'Cause I have my preferences. I'm sure everyone else has their preferences. So do the lizards. I will be doing other webinars. We actually have pending species specific data. So going to be using the next webinar will be more science based and going over some of that data. A 10-month-old skink being 66 grams. That does not seem normal. I would either think that whoever sold you the skink lied to you. I believe I did see your post on Reddit, and the skink looks healthy, so I don't think it was underfed at all. Runts are possible as well with stunted growth, but that would be more noticeable over a consistent time. But slow growth is normally good growth, but it should not be that slow. I'd say we do need more data specifically for different weights. But I personally feel a bit closer to a year is a little bit around 100 grams, depending on species. A bunch of weird bugs from your dubia. Are they the little small ones that are little spiky? Those might be the dermesteds. Those are cleanup crew. So those will actually eat dead bodies of the roaches, sometimes leftover food. They're just kind of known as a cleanup crew. You can keep them and continue using them as cleanup crew in future bug orders, or you can feed them off to a reptile. Not all of them like them. They can be a little bitter to some. Roaches can be a staple. It's just you don't want to feed roach after roach after roach after roach. You want to switch it up. Variety is always key. And you do not want to feed a high protein diet to the roaches. So if you're giving the roaches, I know one common thing was dried cat and dog food. Some people would feed that to the roaches, and that would cause too high of a protein buildup, and that's not what we want. You just want a good commercial insect feeder diet. Skinks do take time to swallow. Really, a lot of foods. Sometimes they will do a yawn. That kind of helps them. I want to figure out what muscles are really working and why they do that entirely, but future studies. But when they yawn, that's kind of them doing a big swallow, is what I call it. Um, you'll kind of see them do like a little S shape swallow. That helps them swallow it down as well. As long as it's not repeating consistently, then we're okay. But if they're doing it for over 5 minutes, then I would be concerned that something might be stuck in their throat. But usually it's just them doing a big swallow, and that's normal. You can send me a private message. I will shoot a message on your Reddit post here in a minute as well. Visually, if I remember correctly, he does look healthy. Big thing is that activity level, though, because blue tongue skinks are kind of like garbage disposals. So if they're not eating and there's nothing to do with brumation going on, nothing to do with hormones going on or improper, husbandry, if their appetite's off, can be a concern. Um, And overall, just you doing what you're doing now should be pretty good. But I can absolutely still go over everything with you later. Yeah, they do have to use gravity. And yeah, some people will notice that their blue tongues tend to poop in the water dish a lot. Supposedly it helps them. I do not recommend soaking your skink to let them poop though, because if they're not ready to poop and you try to have them poop, it can cause a little bit of dehydration. You okay, cat? Cat got spooked. Yeah, no problem. But you're still good to message me for that. And I did not know it was used for crickets, the cat food. That's cool. Neato. Yeah, when they turn their nose up at them, they tend to. I swear they know that people will tend to just give them what they want sometimes. So I do recommend not feeding what he normally eats for the protein source for at least, a couple feedings. If he completely doesn't eat at all, then we will want to do a small incorporation of dog food with some insects on top, like live insects on top, um, and just kind of like slowly decrease the amount of wet food you're feeding and slowly increase the amount of insects you're feeding. And sometimes that does help them balance out and be like, oh, okay, this is food and this is good. Kind of just takes tricking the brain. To get a meat mixture with all the bones, bloods, and brains, you can go to butcheries. You will specifically want to Google whole ground prey. One company I know of is called My Pet Carnivore. It is just a whole bunch of different varieties of just straight whole ground prey. I recommend going into their kitten and puppy section, as that is a very fine grain and reduces any risks of choking. I personally find whole ground prey to be a pretty good treat, but most whole ground prey tends to be a little bit higher in that protein, fat, and calories than something like mice or anoles as feeders, just because of the differences in size. Insects from big box stores, oh my goodness, usually come gut loaded. No. Big box stores don't typically feed their insects very well. Normally just a little bit of a bare minimum. I recommend uh, going onto YouTube and looking up The Art of Gut Loading by Reptiles in Research. It is incredibly, incredibly helpful. I personally prefer to use the Missouri commercial insect blend, and you want them to eat that about 48 hours before you feed them to the skink. So that way the insects can eat the nutrients and then all the nutrients can be processed in their bodies by the time you are feeding it to the skink. Interesting on the crickets and the carbs. I'm going to have to look that up just because that sounds interesting. Science. Yeah, prey model, raw dog. I am so sorry. I'm stumbling over my words. Raw dog food, raw cat food is a good option for whole. Cat's going crazy. Yes, raw cat and dog food is a good option for whole ground prey as well. We actually, I don't know if they're spread out across the U.S. yet, but a company local to the Pacific Northwest is called Mud Bay. It is a really nice pet store for cat and dog food and supplies. And They have a lot of variety of different raw products that I like to grab just as a variety for the reptiles. Sometimes they have duck, sometimes they have rabbit, sometimes they get lucky with bison, elk, or pork as like that rare treat once in a while for them. The freeze-dried animal protein powder. I'm personally not a fan of anything dried. Um, I would recommend maybe adding a little bit of water to paste it up, but if it's more like a supplement, like it's just like a light dusting, then it should be fine. The insect nutrient blend is it's more of a powder. Let me, 1 second. It is the Missouri Better Bug Gut Loading Diet. Let's see if I can. No, it's being a butt. Okay. But no, it's the Missouri Better Bug Gut Loading Diet is the one that I use for feeding my insects. And that's also why I recommend watching that YouTube video by Reptiles and Research, as it is completely science and research based. Reptiles and Research actually has done a lot of global surveys as well, so they've been popping up a lot more frequently, which I'm pretty happy to see because it gets the whole community involved. Thank you for further recommendations for feeders. Any other questions, guys? I will be posting the link to the link to the recording on YouTube, and I will be posting a link to the slideshow, so that way everyone has access to all that information again, as well as the lists. So I don't know how large your collection is, but I have 30 skinks. Was the last time I counted. We did just get 2 in, so probably 32 now. But we do order about 1,500 insects each month, and that does feed all of them and then some. I definitely recommend trying to at least starting to build your own colony, even if you have to consistently purchase some. Let me go back to the insect. Boop. Here we go. So there's a bunch of different roaches, but I do understand that roaches aren't available in every country, and some states are rather limited as well. Beetles are great. Buffalo beetles, death feigning, weevils, darklings. Grasshoppers, if you're in the United States, Kai Fan, KHAIPHAN on Facebook, he breeds captive bred grasshoppers as feeders. Excellent deal. Reptiles love chasing them around. Isopods and night crawlers are also a good one. Love the night crawlers especially. And the isopods, so that way they can all go digging for it. Silkworms and black soldier fly larvae are also really good. Silkworms still a little bit more in moderation, as they are, those are larvae, but they're still pretty good. The canned snails and other, Dean Missimer for grasshoppers, DEANMISSIMER, is the grasshopper breeder. So dragon hoppers is the grasshopper breeder we recommend. Sweet. I'm not sure if there are any live grasshoppers in Canada. I definitely want to find more availabilities in other countries as well so we can help recommend. Silkworms are okay in rotation. They genuinely they're one of the better kind of feeders in terms of nutrients, from what I was told. I could be wrong. But they are pretty good, honestly. Larva does tend to be a bit fattier, so again, you have to do rotation. But honestly, they're pretty decent. Yes, thank you for putting the dragon hoppers in the messages. And I'm happy to help, guys. Really am. I am really excited to start bringing out the more science-based stuff because we do have those pending studies. Hooray. Gonna get excited about that. We always love information. All right, too. Anything else, guys? Crickets can be. They can be. They do tend. You just gotta make sure you gut load them properly. If it's just straight crickets, they tend to be a little bit more poor in nutrients. As long as you gut load them properly, they're good as part of that variety stable, yes. A big thing with the crickets, though, some species do bite. I do not remember which ones, but if like the huge thing with releasing insects in an enclosure to help them forage and hunt, please count how much you put in and go looking for them before you add more. Should have added that earlier. My apologies. But if insects overrun the enclosure, if there's too many insects, then they can start nibbling on the skink a little bit. Typically, you'll see that in the toes, the armpits, their ears, mouths, and then the tip of their tail. That's typically where I'll see some little nipping happening from insects. But as long as it's a very small quantity, no problem. Happy to help, Mel. Thank you. We're always learning, always adding more stuff. So that's what I am really excited to help, push and talk. And eventually, yes, we will be having options for people to participate in studies with us as well. Particularly, it's going to be more survey work with others, with the community, but it is overall very helpful for us. Honestly, I have no idea about the crickets. I personally despise crickets, so I tend to avoid them. I will admit. All right, too. If that's it, thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. Can't wait to have more information for everybody. Again, I will be posting this, and Blackfield cricket's not available in the US. Oh, interesting. But yeah, everything, the webinar and the recorded webinar and the slideshow will be available publicly. We'll be posting those. I will also be posting the animal protein and plant protein separately, just so that way it's just super easy for some people to grab. But thank you everyone for joining. We really appreciate it. And that's a good idea, leaving some greens in there for the insects. All right, bye guys.